Hi, my name is Jennifer Challenor and I'm a lecturer of games art here at the University of Staffordshire.
Hi, I'm Olly Rippon. I'm course leader of games design and programming here at the University of Staffordshire.
So, what do you know about hair?
Not a huge amount.
Right.
It's a fairly simple process for me.
Entirely reasonable. Have you ever heard of Xgen?
It's the name of it rings a bell. It's not something that I've ever seen anybody really use or really looked into myself, but it's one that I would like to see.
Okay, well today we're going to have a bit of a look at Xgen. We're going to build ourselves a bit of a hairstyle and we're going to send it over to the Unreal Engine.
Okay.
We're not going to get anything finished today. We've only got 45 minutes after all, but we're going to do our best.
Okay.
So to start with, we've got this bust that I've made in advance. This one is very loosely based off the character of Misty Knight from Luke Cage. Have you seen Luke Cage?
Yes, at least I saw season 1.
Season 2 was good. I lament that it was cancelled, but it was only a loose sculpt. It's not an exact likeness because that takes hours. So once we go over into Maya and we get started, we've got a few things here. So we've got the bust file prepared. We've got ourselves a little scalp cap ready to go. And there's a bunch of steps we need to complete before we go anywhere near Xgen. I'm going to give you this quick warning. If we don't do all of these steps, Xgen will go boom and we'll lose all of our progress. I've seen it happen so many times.
Fantastic setup. You're really painting me a picture here.
It's a wonderful bit of technology, but you need to be very... it's like driving a car, right? If you get into a manual, you can't just shift into sixth and start going, right? There's a bunch of things you need to do to get to that point. And Xgen is very much the same. So the first thing we want to do is make sure, is our character facing front?
Okay.
In this case, yes, they are. Now, that's only a problem because Xgen symmetry tools are hard-coded to the x-axis.
Oh, okay.
So if we don't do that, then we can't use symmetry. The second thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we have ourselves the correct scale. So is our character the right size? Xgen's going to try to simulate real hairs. So if our character is enormous or if they're really, really tiny, then yeah, that's not going to work. Mm-hmm. In this case, I've already gone ahead and scaled this appropriately, but you would want to check that. The third thing we need is UVs. We need to make sure that our scalp cap is unwrapped. You can theoretically apply Xgen directly to your character's head, but the problem is that once you commit to making Xgen, the mesh cannot change at all.
Okay.
You can't do anything with it. It needs to be exact. And we might still want to change parts of this. So if we make a scalp cap, even if we change the rest of the character, it does make a difference here. So what we'll do is we'll go into our UV editing window for just a moment. This has some automated UVs from when I unwrap the rest of the body. This isn't great though, so I'm just going to quickly tidy this up. So all I want to do is a very quick planar projection. Go in from the top. I'll do a very quick unfold, optimize it a few times to make sure it's neatly relaxed, and then I'm just going to do a quick layout. Now, another thing with Xgen, it does not like UDIMs. So if you've got this over the boundary and it's now using your UV sheet 1, UV sheet 2, it'll break.
For a non-artist, UDIMs are just when it goes over the kind of 0 to 1 UV boundary.
Yeah, so some software will consider each one of these tiles to be its own texture sheet,
Okay.
which is really awesome. But in this case, yeah, Xgen doesn't like it. So all I like to do is I like to scale this down just a little bit, just to make sure we're not touching the boundaries, just to be safe. So we've got ourselves our UVs now as well. So that's 3 steps done already. It's not too terrible, is it? So next thing we need to make sure of is that we have frozen the transforms of this cap, which basically means if we take a look at our channels, what we want is for the scale to be 1, 1, 1 in each direction. If it was scaled up even slightly, it could go bang later on. So all we do is we just go to modify and freeze transforms, and there we go.
Okay.
Those will now be exactly 1 on each direction. It will consider this to be the original size of the mesh now, and there's no risk of it accidentally going blank.
Good.
Now, the other thing we get with Maya is that Maya likes to save a lot of history of all the different things that we've done with this object. Some of those can interfere with things that happen later on.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're just going to go to Edit, we're going to go to Delete by Type, and History. And that will then clear that history. So it's saying that all that stuff that happened in the past, it's a permanent part of this mesh now, we can't change it anymore. And then the last step, the most important one, you, the person watching me on your second screen at home, pay attention to this. We need to set the project in the file, because in a lot of things, when you save, for example, your Unity projects or Unreal projects, they create their own folder structures. They save all the files inside themselves. It's quite nice and simple. Maya theoretically does the same thing, but not to the location you think it does.
Oh, joy.
So if we were to work on this now, what it would do is it would go to my documents. It would go into this Maya folder. It would go into projects, and it would save it all into the default. So let's say that you've saved this scene into your documents folder, like mine is right now, and you went then to take this, you put it on your OneDrive, you go home.
None of it is there anymore.
You've got the scene, you've got the mesh, you've got everything you can see here. All your Xgen files are on the other computer. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell it to store all of these. That's an interesting effect on my normal map there. Oh, it's because I've changed the UVs on the cap, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So it's still using the same normal map, but it's using it in the wrong place. Excellent. That's not to worry. I'll just quickly assign a new material to this. Put another Lambert on it. There we go. So what we're going to do is we'll just go to File. I'm going to go to the Project window. So this is where everything's currently being saved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press New Project, and I will call this my Developer Mode Hair project. And it's going to save into our Maya projects folder. That's generally fine. We could put it somewhere else though. So I could put this into, say, my documents instead. So it will make a folder for this. It will create all of the folders that it needs. It'll create a workspace. Press Accept. And there we go. We can do a little double check on that now. So we can see now we've got the Developer Mode Hair project and everything's in here. And what I will do is I will save this now. So File, Save As. And you can see now we're in the project folder. We're in the project and then in the scenes subfolder. So what that means is that if I wanted to move this to another machine now, I just copy that one folder. It's all in one place. There's no risk of it going back.
That's much easier.
Yeah. So it takes a few little steps to get there. But if you don't follow those exact 6 steps, it dislikes that greatly.
So the setup for it is, in theory, just as important as any of the actual kind of practical steps that you're going to take to kind of make it work. It's
Absolutely.
all build up and all prerequisites.
Exactly. Like I said about driving a car, right? Like, you want to go somewhere, you got to treat the car with respect. You've got to do it properly. Otherwise, you get a broken car and a very expensive insurance claim. So now that we've done all of that, that's when the fun bit happens. We can actually get started with the Xgen now. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to shift the workspace over from General over to Xgen. I'm on the wrong one. Xgen, there we go. Now, Xgen has 2 modes. It has regular Xgen and it has interactive group. They both work in slightly different ways. We're going to be looking at just regular Xgen today, though. So what we're going to do is we're going to create ourselves a new description, and it uses a simple folder structure. So you have a collection and a description. The collection is basically a folder, and the description is every hair you make inside of it.
Okay.
So you can have as many of these as you need to. So in theory, if you wanted one for, say, facial hair, you could have one for the mustache, you could have one for the beard, you could have one for the eyebrows, etc. So I'm going to call this collection my scalp hair, because it's just going to be everything on the scalp. Later on, I might decide to make eyebrows and eyelashes and things. That's fine. But I'd rather have a different collection for those so I can keep them separate. And then for this one, I will just call this Developer Mode Hair. It's going to say, what are we making with this? So you can see we've got splines, we've got groomable splines, we can make geometry, we can make spheres, and we can make cards. Now, all of these are interesting in their own way, but today we're going to use splines because these are the best for sort of long hair and such.
As a quick summary, what is the main difference between kind of all of those different options? Or like, do they have more like specific use cases that I might use cards over splines?
Yeah, so cards is sort of an older workflow for hair now, where you're effectively creating geometric ribbons, and you then put a texture on those to make them look like hair.
Okay, so yeah, sure.
So it's pretty good for that. You can also use Xgen for placing and distributing foliage as well.
Oh, interesting.
So that could be good if you wanted to make like, a geometric grass or something. Spheres, it's mainly for pebbles. I'm going to be completely honest, I've never really found much of a use for this.
Sure.
It exists. You can tell it to work with custom geometry. So if you've made things like trees or plants or things and you want to distribute them.
And kind of go down the foliage route again, yeah.
Yeah, like it even has a little flat as its icon. Groomable splines, effectively, this is the other Xgen workflow I mentioned, the interactive groom one. So for these, rather than control them using our guides like I'll show you in a moment, you actually get like a virtual comb and you can brush things around.
Okay, cool.
So there are times when that can be useful. But I'm going to go with splines for now. I want these placed randomly across the surface, just like real hair. I want it to be chaos. You can have uniformity to it. So if you wanted like neat rows of hedges or trees, you could do that. You can say at specific points, we are not going to do that. There are valid cases for this, but unless you want to place every single hair one by one, that's
generally not worth it.
Probably not. So we'll do random. It will then say, do we want to place and shape guides or do we want to use attributes? We're not going to, well, we actually are going to use some attributes today, but not for placing the primitives with.
Okay.
So we're going to go with placing and shaping guides. We'll press create, and that will then create us our Xgen groom. Isn't it lovely?
Now, I'm noticing that there's still no hair, as it were.
That's a problem, isn't it?
Maybe?
And the reason for this being is we've not told it where to put the hair yet.
Oh, yes, because we need to give it the guides to actually kind of know. It can randomly place hair, but until you say where within bounds it should be randomly placed, it's not actually going to try anything, I'm guessing.
Exactly. So we can tell it to make some guides. So we click on our little guides tool. You'll notice here at the top, we've got this really big toolbar. Now, this half here is all for Xgen. This half is all for interactive groom. So we can actually ignore all of these today. We're not using them.
Okay.
We're not going to use most of the tools on here. We might use mirror because that could be pretty useful. We might hide and show things. This here, I like to refer to this as the dedicated crash Maya button. We're not going to click this button today. So what we're going to do is we're going to just click and place, and you'll see now we've made a guide. Nothing's happened yet though. Even if I try, we're not going to see anything. So if I place a few of these and I press the button, you can see now we're starting to create hair.
Okay.
So you need, I think it's at least 3 guides for anything to happen, but that will start to create and distribute these primitives. So the way that these work is actually really, really simple. You can see it's made these little primitive shapes for our hairs. And if I were to start styling this now by using my little grooming tool, all I need to do, so I've got one selected at the moment, which is why I can't groom that one. If I were to click and drag now, you can see I've reshaped the guide. And what the guide's doing is in a big radius around it, it's going to have control over all of those primitives. So if I were to press the update button now, you'll see they've started to curve to follow that one. And what they will do is they'll interpolate between this one and the next one. So because this one's still completely straight, you can see we get a lot of bend here, a little bit less bend, and then back to being straight to line up with this guide again.
Okay.
So what we're going to be doing is placing lots of guides and guiding them into place, and then Xgen will automatically create the hairs and automatically style them to follow those guides. So it's a really simple process. So we can think about just maybe covering the scalp with a bunch of these to start with. Now, typically speaking, you don't want too many of these. If you have a lot of them, the hair becomes really hard to control. So I normally start by just placing a bunch of these, mostly at random if I'm honest, but we can add and remove them as we go. There's no upper or lower limit on these. So
I'm also noticing actually that as you're placing new guides around the one that you've already styled, that they're like already interpolating in the same way, that they're kind of trying to match the guides that are already there to, I guess, like stay natural to the style that you've already created.
Yeah, they do that. So in some cases, that's really helpful. In some cases, it can cause problems. But in this case, it's generally pretty good.
Yeah.
So if I click preview again now, you can see we're actually starting to fill up the head with hair, which is pretty good. Now, one little setting I always like to turn on is this one here called Only Primitives in the View. What it basically means is that if I were to reset this now, because it couldn't see these guides at the top when I press refresh, it doesn't render the hair from those. So you end up with scenarios where your hair comes through really patchy. If you turn this off, then it will always render them regardless, which is a bit more convenient when you're getting started at least. So we've got a bunch of these now. So we can start to think about the overall shape of them. Do these look about the same width as a human hair?
Depends on the hair. Probably not.
Depends on the hair. Interesting you should say that. We're going to go into that. So yeah, the reason for that being is that they've got a width of 0.1. The actual value for human hair is going to be 0.01. So they should actually be relatively thin.
Okay.
Now, the other thing we can think about as well is, again, the shape. That is perfectly cylindrical at the moment. Now, human hair doesn't do that. It tapers in. So we've got two ways of controlling that. We can either use the taper value like this, which is pretty decent. You can actually taper in the opposite direction if you want, and they get thicker towards the end. So that's an option. The other option that we have is that we can use the width ramp up here. So we can actually tell it to be different thicknesses at different points. So you can see it's created a point there, and we can actually tell it if we wanted to be like really thin at the base and then get thicker or whatever. So that's something I'll typically do. And what I'll normally do is I won't let the hair ever hit the thinnest possible point it can. Just on the grounds that in Xgen it doesn't look great, because it ends up being thinner than you can actually see. So the hairs end up looking a bit shorter than they should do.
Okay.
So I'll always leave them about there. I think that's pretty good. We can also increase the number of hairs we have as well. So at the moment we're on a density of 1. So if I would start pushing this up, we start to create more and more hair. So if we zoom out and have a look, that is an interesting hairline we've got there, isn't it?
It's very sharp.
Yeah, it's following our geometry, like very close. So that's the first thing we really want to fix. We want to, actually establish, we've got this big scalp cap. Do we actually want the hair to go all the way with it? The answer is probably not. So with a scalp cap, what you typically do is you make it a bit bigger than it needs to be, and then you can manually paint on where you want the hairs to appear.
Okay.
So if I were to go into my mask now, what I can do is, you can see we've got this little expression written in here. I'm going to replace this with a map. So I'll say create a map, and I'll just call this my density map. Nearly call it the destiny map then. Our technician would have got excited. So I'm going to start this out with a base color of black. Now the reason for this being is that when you're painting a mask, anything black on a mask doesn't appear, anything that's white does. So if I press create now, you can see we've got nothing here. If I go into my painting options, we are getting an error message. That is wonderful. Is that because I'm in shaded mode? It is not. Excellent. We are getting a Xgen error while setting up the paint tool. Wonderful. Okay, well in that case I'm just going to quickly save and I will restart the program. Now that's the other thing to really be aware of with Xgen. It does get buggy, it does crash. It was initially built to be a plugin for a very specific project, and it ended up being integrated as part of Maya.
Okay.
So this stuff, it happens.
So it's got a bit of a history for, very specific use cases, and maybe not as much support as we would like it to have.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Now, don't get me wrong, what it does extremely well. It's a very powerful tool. It's just, that can happen. So if you ever are in this situation where you've accidentally crashed something, it happens, you just want to make sure that you've got the correct project set before you open the scene. If you've got the wrong project loaded, again, it won't know where to find all its files, and it'll have a bit of a bad time. So we're going to open this again from the version that we had down there. So there we go, we are now back in the scene. Looks like our density might need a quick refresh. And what we will do is we will just make ourselves a new map, just because I think that one map had a bit of an issue. So we'll call this one new density map. We'll start this one. Actually, we'll start this one with pure white. Why not? Yep, fixed it. Yay. Cool. All right, sorry about that, folks. I had a minor technical issue. Right, so now that we've done this, we can start to think now about creating our mask, because we don't want to have sharp edges everywhere. So what we'll do is we're just going to create ourselves a new map, and I'm just going to call this my density mask, and we'll set it to pure black to start with, just on the grounds that when we use a mask, anything that's pure black won't show, anything that's white will show, and then shades of grey will alternate between. So we'll create this, and there we go. Goodness me, we've lost our brush already, that's good. So there we go, you can see now that this is pure black. If I were to open up my brush tool now, and I were to set the colour now to, say, pure white, as soon as I start painting on the surface here, you see we're creating a spot. If I were to quickly just say, save that texture, and then save it in the PTEX map, you can see now we're only going to get hair on that little white spot, which is pretty convenient. So what we can do here is we need to have a quick look at our reference. So again, we're working on the character of Misty Knight as played by Simone Missick. So we take a look, I've got some references ready. Don't ever try to make hair without references. It is the worst decision you can make. So we can see that her hairline's a little bit higher and it's got a very round shape to it. We can't really see much of her forehead or the side of her head, so we are going to have to maybe iterate on this a few times until we get it right. So what we'll do is I'm going to scroll down. There's a little setting in stroke called reflection, which basically means symmetry. Just going to speed this up just a little bit. So I'm going to set my brush color back to white, and then we can just start to paint in that hairline. That might be a little bit too high. It's a little bit difficult to judge based on the references at times. We might find that we have to just go back and tweak this a bit.
And because it's in a mask and the way that it's applying it as a texture, actually editing this should be a really quite easy process, because you're not having to adjust any of the guides or any of the actual kind of settings for the way that the hair is being placed. It's just you need to paint a texture differently.
Exactly. So at any point we can go back and we can just repaint this, or we can adjust it. We can get this exactly right. I'm painting with a brush with a slightly soft edge, which means that we might get a little bit of fall off around the sides. Mm-hmm. In some cases that's fine, in other cases it can cause a few problems. So I'm not going to worry about that too much just yet. So I'm just going to quickly fill in this space here. You'll see I paint the outline first and I just fill in the rest. So what we do is we save the image file itself. That's now saved that as a picture. And now as soon as we save it here, it's going to generate a PTEX file from this,
okay,
which is a file format created by Disney. Yeah. Oh, it looks like we missed a little bit. Sometimes the reflection tool does break. If that happens, you just do it again. So you just press save. You generate a PTEX map from there, and you can see now we've got the hair sort of following a bit more of a hairline, which is pretty good. So I'm just going to quickly fix that. Again, we lost some of the stuff with the technical issue. I'm very sorry. So there we go. We'll increase the density again, and now that's going to just follow that overall structure, which is pretty convenient. So what we can do with this now is we can start to think about maybe trying to make this look a little bit more like hair. Because if I push this really far up, it's a bit sort of blockish in many regards. It doesn't really look a whole lot like you'd expect hair to, especially because it's completely perfectly evenly lengthed, isn't it? It's a bit strange. So one thing that you'll notice is that the hairs are the same length as the guides. So if we increase the length of the guides, that will then increase the radius, well, that increases the hair size as well. Mm-hmm. So the guides here are how we control most of this, to be honest. Very versatile. But there's a few other things we might want. For example, if we take a look at her hair, she has a parting. Now, in some cases, it's slightly off-center. In other cases, it's close to the center. I think I'm probably going to follow this reference here because I can just see it most clearly.
Yeah.
So we're just going to create that general parting shape. And for this one, we need another mask. So we'll scroll down to the region controls, and we need to make a region map. So how do you part your hair normally?
I think normally I've kind of got a little bit of a natural parting on the right, and then kind of, I think it naturally sort of sweeps over to the left.
That's fair. Everyone's hair does something similar. So what's the difference between this one and the last one we painted?
Oh, this one's now actually starting off as red.
It
so
is.
Instead of a it kind of, instead of lerping between black and white, I'm guessing that this is something closer to a weight map?
Not quite.
Not quite.
So with a region, we can define a different region of the hair where it will part.
Okay.
So every different colour is a different region, which means we need to make sure we use a brush with a really sharp edge, because if it blends, every blended pixel will be its own region of hair.
Oh, okay.
Which is a problem.
Yeah.
So what I like to do here is I start with red, and I'll use the preset colours that come with Maya, because that way I'm not messing around trying to figure out sort of, which one of these is the correct colour to get the same region. So looking at this, slightly off to the centre, sort of midway through the brow ridge, most likely. I'm thinking somewhere around there is where it's going to part. Yeah. Might be wrong, we'll find out. So all I'm going to do for this is just paint in this area here, sort of down where that goes, all the way down to the back. And then I'll paint in this little space here. So we've now got 2 regions of hair. That does not look to be very even from the top, so I might just clean that up just a little bit more. If I do bring it a little bit closer to the centre, it's not the end of the world, because again, we've seen that, her hair does sometimes part a bit close to the centre. So there we go. And same as before, we're just going to open this up. We're going to press Save Textures, and then we're going to press the Save button. And there we go. Isn't that a wonderful looking parting?
Now, it might be because I'm sat further away from the screen than you are, but it's kind of there, but it doesn't really look like it's done a huge amount of actually parting the hair yet.
It hasn't, because we've made a mask, but we've not told it to do anything with it.
That'll be it.
So if I set this to a value of 1 now, you can see now.
There it is.
Now it's going to part it, but it's parting it all the way down.
Yeah, that is physically parted that hair.
It really has. So that's a bit of a problem, because we want it to stop probably around the crown, don't we? So what we'll do is we can just make another mask. So we will create ourselves a region. Well, we'll call this the region part. Well, again, we'll start with pure black, and we'll create this. And now all we're going to do is, this time I will turn reflection off. We don't want reflection switched on. I can use a soft brush, that's fine. And all I'm going to do is just roughly where that was, I'm just going to paint a line down there. I'm going to take that all the way through, sort of roughly over there. So that means it will apply the region mask all the way down to about here, and then it'll stop. Now again, ideally I'd like a reference image of this to make sure I'm doing it completely accurately. But there we go. So you can see now we've got the parting that goes all the way up to here, and then it stops. So we can make those as often as we need to. We can really play around with those. We can get all kinds of cool effects. So next thing to think about, let's have a bit of a look at the hair itself, because it's currently not behaving very much like hair would at all. The other thing we need to think about is the hair type as well. So when we're talking about hair types, what we often refer to is the Andre Walker hair chart. So we're referring to effectively this, which is a bit of a chart that describes everyone's hair and how it behaves, because everyone's hair is a bit different. And it's something that we really need to understand, especially if you're going into the art side of things, that every person is a bit different, and we need to understand what those differences are so we can recreate them properly. And so for the hair that we're working on today for Simone Missick, we know it's going to be type 4 hair. Whether it's going to be sort of between sort of 4A to 4B, that's something that we'd really decide with our modifiers. Now, again, if I was working on this as a complete accurate project, I would ideally like to know what type of hair she has. That wasn't information I was able to find. There is a certain point when you're Googling different key phrases where it comes across as stalking. So I was like, okay, I'll just accept it's type 4 hair for today. So what we can do is we can start to think about modifiers, and that's where a lot of the fun really starts to happen here. So we can add ourselves a modifier, and we can add a lot of different things here. Now, some of these we don't necessarily need because they're really made for simulation instead. So we don't necessarily need like wind or forces or anything like that. We're not animating it. But we do want something like, say, clumps. So we add a clump modifier, and oh no, error message, it's saying it doesn't work. That might throw you off. Don't let it.
Okay.
It's done everything it needs to do, but it doesn't actually know where to clump the hair. So we have to give it clumping maps. So we just say, generate one. We'll leave it on the defaults for now. We press save. There we go. It's now clumped the hair. And if we were to give that a larger number, so if I were to say density of, say, 5 instead, it's going to form smaller clumps. So I'll leave that on 1 for now, because I think 1 should be about fine. We might change that as we go. We can come back and we can edit this whenever we need to. I'm not too worried. So the hair is now very spiky, which is kind of fun. Not quite the right type of hair we're looking to make, but it's kind of fun. So what's going to happen here is it's going to clump all of this hair together, and it's going to go from the root all the way to the tip, and it's going to make these really sharp clumps. So we can edit that a little bit. We can tell it sort of how much to clump them with. Did it just undo my generator? It did. Very inconsiderate of you, Martin. There we go. So we can move these up and down. We can create like different clumping effects and such, which is kind of fun. There we go. So what we're really going to look to do here is create some clumping. And what we can do is, using the effects here, we can tell the clumps to work in all kinds of different ways. So, for example, if I wanted to add curls to this, I could say, add in some curls, and it doesn't do anything. Because even though we've told it to curl, it's curling on a straight line. Mm-hmm. So if I were to edit this now, you can see it's going to start to curl all of those clumps, which is kind of fun. It's currently trying to do 3 curls over the duration of that, which isn't the most ideal, I guess. So if I told it to do just 1 or 2 instead, you might see that happening a little bit more neatly, which is kind of interesting. What we can also do is we can, I'll put this up to say 2 for now, like so. And then what I want to do is I'm just going to increase the length of the hair a bit, because it's a little bit short right now. So we'll select all of our guides, we'll go to primitives, and what we'll do is we'll just, you can set the length here. I'm actually not going to do that. I'm going to say set the length of the primitives instead. So I'll set this to say 3, and then when we update this now, we'll see those curls starting to appear. If I were to go into the offset now, this is where this does actually really start to get a lot of fun. We can tell it to offset those curls as well, so we can create more of a ringlet shape.
Okay.
So if I put this up to say 2 instead, that's a little bit much, but you can see now it is starting to form more of a ring shape. But if we zoom in, you're going to see these are really sharp and angular. Mm-hmm. And that's because we have what's called control verts inside of the hair. So that's saying each of these modifiers basically draws a number of points through the hair, and it's got 5 of those from roots to tip.
Okay.
We need a bit more than that, don't we? So I'll put this up to say, I don't know, 200. Now that's quite a lot, but don't worry, it's being dramatic, it's fine.
What would a kind of like happy number for that be? Is 200 kind of your expected average, or is it
it's a lot
higher than above, and you would probably tone it back depending on what you needed?
I would always start on a high number, and then once I've made the hair, I'll start to reduce that for the sake of optimization.
Yeah.
So 200 is good to get started, but you can see now we've got those curls appearing, so I'll change the offset down to say 1 instead.
And because now you've got 200 control verts, actually regenning the hair is going to take a little bit longer every time.
No, it shouldn't take that long. It's being dramatic. Yeah. But for the sake of it, I'll turn that down to 100. 100 is probably fine for what we're doing, to be completely honest. It's just, I like to have more. I can hear the fans kicking in. Yeah. That means it's working. So there we go. So we're starting to create more of like a ringlet shape, and you can see that. And we can play around with this as well. We don't have to leave this on the default. So we can say that, you know, with regards to these, we want like a little bit more as we go. And we don't necessarily want it to taper off completely. So we might push that up a little bit. So there we go. So we can start to create all kinds of different hair shapes. Now, 1 might be quite a lot. It might not be enough. If I put the curls up now to like, say, not 14, say 4 curls over the duration instead, we're starting to get much more of a curl effect. We're starting to get hair that's starting little by little to adhere a bit more to our reference image. Because again, we know that we need the hair to form lots and lots and lots of these little curls. So we've created some big ones at the moment, and that's fine. If I were to now go back into my setup maps, now to say density of 2 instead, again, it's going to take a moment for it to do this now. We're going to get lots more of those, but thinner in overall volume, which is pretty convenient. We can do an awful lot with this as well. So we could also say, let's add a little bit of noise into the equation as well, so that instead of them all being completely neat, they're going to start to vary up a little bit as well. So if I put this up to say a value of 2, At the moment, it's not doing anything. So we don't really want it to be noisy at the root, but we do want it to get a little bit noisier as it goes. So you can see now, each of those is starting to displace a little bit, and we're going to get a bit more sort of natural chaos to it. They're not all going to behave in exactly the same way. And the further I push this, kind of the noisier those are going to get, which is pretty fun. So we can also look at doing some other things as well. So for example, you don't want to start grooming these guides into place. If we take a look at our reference, we can see that her hair is going to be quite long. It's going to go sort of around the shape of her head. So what we'll do is we'll just turn off the preview for a second so we can see the actual guides. We can just start to groom these into place. So take a brush, just start combing these into place.
So the kind of workflow that you're going for with this, it seems very kind of get the general shape of like almost like individual hairs first, and then start not decorating. That's not the word I'm looking for. But then you start kind of
styling.
Yeah. Then once you have like, okay, this is what the hair is, and now this is what it should look like.
Yeah, exactly. So we can start to get these into place, and what I'll typically do is with guides, if you want to get the best result, you want them to poke out the head a little bit first and then start the curl. Ones like this are going to actually have a few little issues that they're going to literally start growing directly in that direction, and it's going to make the scalp look patchy and strange. Hair doesn't do that. It starts to grow out and then it starts to form that little curve. So I'm not going to do all of these today because I'm running out of time, and I know that. But if I turn those on now, you can see we are starting to style those a bit. Hair's not long enough though, so we need to make these even longer. So turn off the hair, we'll set the length from, what was it before? Was it on 3 or 4 we were on? Let's go up to say 10 for now. So there we go. So that's getting a little bit closer. I don't think that's quite long enough, but it's getting there at this point. Whenever you do increase the length of these, they do tend to go off in different directions. It's quite funny. So we'll do that. And we can start to push these around. We can really just, again, it's just a little bit of an iterative process above all else. You're going to get this just a little bit wrong at first. And it is going to take a little bit back and forth. We don't have enough guides at the back of the head now, so we actually are getting a large exposed section. So we'll just add in a couple more guides back here, just closer to that area. Because again, each one of them is going to control that little radius around them. So if you don't have any guides, then you don't get any hair is the short version. And if you don't have that little uplift I mentioned before, if the hair does part straight into if it goes straight into that direction like this.
And that's how you end up with that very significant parting.
Yeah, it ends up looking way more severe than it should. So that's going to be that. So other things that I find are quite helpful as well are going to be things along the lines of, actually making the hair the right colour. Because at the moment, this is like the default Xgen sort of like orangish colour, which is fine if that's your character's hair colour. For our reference, that's not quite right. She's got really dark hair. So what we could do is we could go into Arnold and we could start to add a material into this. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my primitive colour. I'm going to reset this to a slider. And now I can control the hair with a slider instead. So the further I go, the brighter it's going to get.
Okay.
So it's going to literally just add more and more melanin and lightness to the hair, less melanin to the hair as it goes. So if I put this on a really low value, we'll get a nice dark brown colour. It's still a little bit lighter than her hair colour, but it'll work for the sake of today at least anyway. So we can start to push that into position, and there we go. So straight away, we're actually getting something it's not quite right yet. There's going to be a bit of iteration to make this really look like Type 4 hair. So we could go into modifiers and we could think about maybe adding in, say, a noise modifier to this. So before, when we added noise, we added it to each clump. This will add it to each hair.
Okay.
So you can see now on a noise value of 1, if I just turn this on and off for a second.
Oh yeah, it's getting a lot. It looks like it's getting a lot thicker with the noise, actually, yeah.
It looks like it. It's not. It's just because it's breaking up the shape.
Yeah.
The hairs were already there. They just weren't distributed properly. I'm going to keep playing with these guides if I don't stop myself. So we could add in noise. We could think about adding in something like, say, a cut modifier as well. So what this will do is it will go through each hair and it will just reduce a little bit of the maximum length of each of them by a random value between 0 to 0.2.
Okay.
So that way it adds a bit more variance in. So effectively, with the hair, we'd be looking at guides, we'd be looking at modifiers, we'd be looking at doing that. And that would just be this big iterative process until you've got the hairstyle. It's going to take a couple of hours, but it's pretty straightforward. I say it's straightforward after going through a million technical steps. But
was there only 6 prerequisites that you needed to really get started with it?
Exactly. So the last thing I want to do just before we finish is we're just going to put it into Unreal Engine, because this is the really cool thing Unreal did. Yeah, the older card-based workflows, Unreal's documentation now considers to be deprecated.
Okay.
So this is where everything's really starting to move in terms of overall game hair. So what we could do here is, if we wanted to turn this into a game hair, we just select our description, we just go into generate, we're just going to convert this over to an interactive groom for just a moment. So it's going to give us a name, we'll just say dev IG for interactive groom. There we go, developer interactive groom. So this one now is basically the same as the old one, but it works with the other tools. The reason we've done that is because it needs to be an interactive groom before we can send it to Unreal.
Okay.
So this is just a temporary step. We just get rid of this. So all we're going to do is we're going to go to cache, going to go to export cache, and we're going to tell it to export it on the current frame, like so. And we'll put this into our documents as our dev hair alembic. It's got a little alembic file. So we'll export that. And there we go. We can delete this now. We don't need the interactive groom anymore. We hop over to the Unreal Engine. Now, for this, you do need the plugin enabled for the groom stuff. I've already enabled it for this project, but it's not enabled by default, so you would need to turn these on. And that does require a restart of the engine. So if we go to import now, we can find this. We can import the ABC file. And it's going to say it's valid. That's good. That means it's worked. So we press import. And we've now got our file. So it's going to have a couple of quirks to get started. So we'll drag this into the scene. First of all, it's facing the wrong way because Unreal uses a different coordinate system from Maya. So we need to rotate this by 90 degrees in one direction and then 180 in the other. Other problem. Where is the parting on this hair?
Oh, it's mirrored.
It's mirrored. So we want to make sure we set this to -1, just to flip that back over. And then from here, we could now just put this to align with our character. Now, it's not fully aligned at the moment, so we'd have to go and adjust that a little bit just to get that exactly where it should be. My cursor keeps disappearing. Not again. Excellent, my cursor's gone. Cool. It's fine, I didn't need to see anyway. So with that now, all we're going to do is just assign a quick material to it. So I'm going to assign one I've already made, and I've left the colours really vibrant. So we're going to get like parrot hair to start with.
Oh, fantastic.
And all we need to do here, first of all, if we zoom in, you see how thick those hairs are? Yeah, Unreal likes to do this, where it likes to override the width value. So if we go into our strands, and we just turn hair width back to 0.01, it's going to start to look more like hair again. A bit more ideal. So there we go.
Oh, yeah, that's closer, yeah.
But it's still a little bit overly vibrant. And my cursor is still missing, so I still can't put that back on. If we open up the material, this really just is the one from Epic's documentation that I've just quickly thrown back together. So it's the same one from their website. And if I were to start to select some really like more dark brown colors here, sort of, I'm not going to go for like pure black or anything because her hair does still have like a little bit of redness to it, but it's quite subtle. So I'll maybe have like just a couple of little value variations in here. Sort of a few more red tones. It's a little bit too saturated at the moment, but you can see we've got that. We can play around with how much color variation we want to get. We can play around with how bright the hair's going to be, so we could make it a little bit darker. We can make it really bright if we wanted to. We've got a few options there, courtesy of the shader. And you can play around with some of the roughness as well, so you can start to make it look a little bit more like hair. And there we go, that's it. That's how you can make some content with Xgen, and you can send it over to the Unreal Engine. And this is now game ready. If we wanted to, we could add physics to this as well and make it bounce and move.
Now you're talking how I know how to do stuff.
So what do you think?
That's really, really cool. The actual process seems really, really easy, and it is just a case of the amount of time you spend with it is all you're really limited by to making it look really good. So time and references are the two things that I've taken away from this.
Absolutely. Look at references, be iterative, and just keep going backwards and forwards. One thing I do see a lot of my students doing is they'll spend a lot of time in Xgen and then not take it till Unreal till really late in the process. Like, no, do that early. Keep going back and forth, and that's how you'll develop it.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for your time, people. Hope that was insightful. Hope you've learned a bit about the hair workflow, and I look forward to seeing the things that you make. Thank you very much.